We're on. Hey. Welcome to episode 257 of Ugly Awesome Podcast. I'm so excited to talk to my guest today. I'll tell you why. I grew up in South Dakota. My parents moved here when I was 3, and I've always lived in the area of Sioux Falls. Is my hometown. Actually, I have another small hometown, but it's my bigger hometown. I love Sioux Falls. I walk around it constantly. And in the last few years, I met my guest today through a certain social circle, and I come to find out he's moved from the East Coast, that he's specifically chosen this town I love, and he's thriving here, and that's just amazing to me. And then beyond that, I've come to find out that he's been on a profound journey from deep doubt and skepticism to profound faith in his own life, and it's just epic. Plus, he exudes excellence and exudes kindness, and I could go on and on and on and on, but I want to bring him on. But first, we need his intro, which is now right here. So sometimes we need to adapt. So we're going to just bring him on now. When I say we're going to bring him on now, I mean I'm going to bring him on right now. So without further ado, Kiley.
Hi, Jason. Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. I was hoping for the intro, which isn't here. Would you please say Kiley Naro?
Certainly, yes. Kiley Naro. That's how I pronounce my name.
Wonderful. So Kiley, if we had known each other as kids, say like 7 or 8, and I had come over to your house, what would you have wanted to do?
Probably play Ninja Turtles would be where I would start. Whether that was a video game or whether it was pretending, right? You and I could be Ninja Turtles, and I don't know, we would go fight Shredder or something. So that would be one thing maybe that we would do at that age. I liked to play soccer as a kid, and I liked to ride my bike. I'd like to go out in the woods behind my parents' house and just build forts with sticks. So maybe a few things like that. I'm sure we could come up with something.
So I like to ride bikes and build forts with sticks, and I would have been interested in your interest in Ninja Turtles a lot. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Hampshire, the southern part of New Hampshire, about an hour north of Boston, in a little town called Merrimack. But it's funny because little town, as you alluded to earlier, on the East Coast means something a little different than it does out here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
But how big do you think your town was, or was it?
I would estimate it was about 35,000 people.
Oh, yeah. Your little town is
Yes.
a medium to large,
Yes.
large town out here.
Yes.
Um, if I had asked you at that age, what do you think you would want to do when you grew up? What would you have said?
I remember being a boy and people would ask me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And the answer that often sticks out in my mind is I said I wanted to be the president of the United States.
Hmm.
so I'm not so sure I'd want to go for that job today, but I would say that that was maybe the first real clear idea I had of what I wanted to be when I grew up. And from there, of course, it got a little more complicated. I was blessed to learn very early that technology was something that interested me, especially computers and computer programming. And that's been a course that has served me very well. It's blessed my life, and hopefully what I've been able to offer has been a blessing to others in that as well. But that's something that I would say I probably figured that out only a few years after the time frame you're asking about. Maybe by the time I was 10 or 12 years old, I think I had a pretty clear idea.
First of all, what do you love about the idea of being president?
Today, not much.
But I mean back then.
Well, I'll try to answer your question here by backing up a moment, which is to say, even today, I think one of the opportunities that a good president has is the opportunity to bring people together. And
Hmm.
I think that's important. Whether that's always been my motivation, I don't know. I mean, as a child, I can't say I understood much about why that role appealed to me. I guess I've never really thought very carefully about it. Leadership is something that I'm studying. It's something I'm learning about. I'm trying to practice. I've still got a lot to learn, but I think that I don't know if that's a something that I inherited from my parents or maybe something that I just picked up from my environment at an early age. I don't know if that's biological or if it's social, but whatever it is, I find myself curious about the topic of leadership and striving to learn and grow in that area. So again, I don't think at that age I had a clear idea that that's what was going on, but looking back, I wonder if maybe that's part of the connection.
This brings up. Please tell me about your parents. You've said before that you think they taught you diligence and.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, certainly I do. I think my parents taught me a lot of good things. They were good people. They are good people, and my for most of my young life, my father worked in a bottle factory. He was I couldn't say what his official title was, but what I understood he did as a child was that he would help make sure that things continued running. He's always been very good with his hands, so he's very technical, very good at problem solving. He's
Hmm.
excellent at any household problem you could throw at him. He can put things together, he can build things, he can fix things, and that
Hmm.
extends into cars, that extends into electrical. I mean, there's virtually no problem you can throw at my father that he can't figure out in some way. And my mother, she worked at Pizza Hut for most of my, well, I mean, even until she retired, she worked there as a waitress. So she was there for decades, and she was one of those like rock star waitresses that everybody knew, all the regulars knew, all the staff knew, the bosses, the managers in the area wanted her to work for them because they knew that she knew what she was doing and she would get the job done, and she would be honest and faithful in her work. And my parents had 5 children. I am the fourth of 5 children.
Oh, wow.
And what else would I add here? I mean, there's plenty to say, of course, but I would I would I would maybe briefly introduce my parents in that way.
What was your mom at the same Pizza Hut her whole career, or did she change?
She moved a few times, always in the same area because we grew up in that town and lived in that town my whole life. That my parents still live in my childhood home today, but they different stores would open and close for a period of time. So she always worked in the area, but the exactly which store would change from time to time.
As you say, I bet her managers absolutely loved her. That she was just great with the customers, and sounds like she was just a rock star employee
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, that's right. And her diligent effort there was able to bear fruit for most of my family because I think at one point, literally every member of my immediate family worked in some capacity for a Pizza Hut somewhere. So we all have her to thank for helping us get that door into the professional world. My mother got me that first job. I mean, I had to interview, right? But she was able to get me that interview for my first job there. And I started as they called it the cut boy, right? So working the table where you cut the pizzas. And then I went from there to serving tables, and my mother trained me on how to do that. Of course, she was a great teacher there. And then I spent time working as a cook for the same store, the same restaurant, until I got my first programming job. And at that point, I haven't. Well, I've just been working in programming since. But yeah, again, I think there was a point where we all we all had some hand in the production across different restaurants, and that really was, I think, in large credit to the fact that she had been so diligent that the restaurant knew when they were hiring somebody from our family that they were hiring somebody that they could trust.
Did you get a chance to work at the same Pizza Hut as your mom at the
Oh, yeah.
same time?
Yes, and at the same shift. We rarely worked the same role at the same shift, maybe a few times, but most of the time when she and I would be working together at the same restaurant, it would be that she was up front serving the tables, and then I would be in the back, typically cutting the pizza.
Oh, wow! How fun too!
That was fun, and it
And
was
then
great. It was a great job.
What?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It was a great first job. It was a great chance to learn how to be on time, how to follow the rules, how to serve customers, right? Take care of people. I mean, I learned a lot of professional skills from starting at that job. And I think to myself, had my mother not been so, again, diligent in her role, that there's who knows where I could have ended up working and what sort of lessons I would have learned. So I'm very grateful for that.
And it occurs to me when you describe what your dad does that he solves problems more in the mechanical world, and you solve problems more in the programming world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there a connection there? Or am I just making it up?
Well, I think there's a thread. We can pull it a little bit. One of the things I do love about computer programming is the fact that we get to sit with people and learn, at least the way I do it. I like to sit with people and learn what their problems are or what opportunities exist in their work. And then I get the chance to brainstorm an idea that I think will solve the problem, build it, put it in front of the person, and get to watch their face. Like, are they excited about what I've produced, or did they say, oh, we really need to do something else, right? And I love that. I love that I get to take a real problem, use my own ingenuity and creativity to solve that problem, and then deliver something to someone that they can say, thank you, you really solved a real, true problem. And I think in some ways, there are some parallels to the kind of the kind of work and the kind of hobbies that my father engages in, and around the house or professionally, because again, he's solving problems as well. When a machine goes down, he's the one that has to go in and figure out what's going wrong, why is it going wrong, and how do we make it right.
Thanks for pulling that thread a little bit. When I asked the question, I'm like, oh my gosh, is there anything here? So thanks for pulling the thread.
My pleasure.
So how do you handle it? Like, it's a great day when you create something. I imagine your customer is like, oh my gosh, thank you, Kiley. You solved it. This is amazing. But how do you deal with it when they go, oh, after you've worked like a lot of time on something and they go, oh, this isn't quite right. This isn't what I need. How do you deal with the feelings that come up?
Yeah. There are a lot of different routes that we could take in response to your question. It's a good question. I'll try to honor what you asked about the feelings there. I think for me, the important thing is to pay attention to the fact that nobody's perfect. And oftentimes when I'm trying to put something in front of someone, it's either not the first time they've seen it, or it is the first time, and what I've built is something pretty low risk in a short time frame. Wherefore, if they say, no, this isn't what we're talking about at all, great, we can go in a different direction, and there's really not much lost. There's plenty to talk about there. But I think for me, I've had experiences in my career where I've really invested heavily in something and put it in front of, say, a target audience, and had the person be like, this stinks. That hurts. And perhaps I've, again, never connected these dots before, but perhaps that's part of why I'm so drawn to the approach of solving problems that involves little iterations, just a little step forward here and here and here and here. It allows us to course correct. And then that way we don't typically invest a whole bunch of time and energy into something that turns out isn't going to work.
This is a sidebar, but it's fascinating to me. So you're saying you're not going to invest 200 hours in a project before showing it to a client. You may invest 2 or 3 hours and then show it.
That's the goal. And of course, the numbers will change based upon the context and the scenario, the individuals involved, right? There's a lot of variables that we would look at. But yeah, the idea is that we want to favor short, frequent delivery of value. And the idea is that we don't have to solve all the world's problems, but can we solve one small problem and start with that, and then figure out, even if we have to course correct a few times, but hopefully, we can figure out how to solve that problem. And then we just iterate and we solve the next problem, and then we solve the next problem, and then we solve the next problem, right? And we just, and if somewhere along the way we take a step in the wrong direction, we go, oh, okay, that was the wrong direction. We go back to where we were, and then we go to the place we're meant to be.
So when we started this interview almost 20 minutes ago, I didn't expect that nugget to come out at all, but it's a real nugget for me, and I hope other people, because it's tempting to say, oh gosh, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to get it perfect, and then show the person, and they're going to go, you're amazing, you did it perfectly. But it sounds like, I know from past experience that can be kind of setting ourselves up for disappointment and setting a client or whoever up for disappointment. So thanks for that unanticipated nugget.
For yourself or for others that may be curious, there's an excellent book on the topic written by Dr. Jeff Sutherland. It's called Scrum, 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 like what they do in, what do they call it? What's that sport that's really popular in New Zealand that's almost like rugby?
Yeah, rugby.
Right? A scrum is a huddle, right? And if anybody sees this, they're going to be like, that guy doesn't know what, I just forgot, okay? But anyway, there's a really good
but for your information, I didn't know it all, so you're ahead of me.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, the point is that there's a really good book on the topic. It's called Scrum, Twice the Work in Half the Time, right? And for those that are really quick with math, that's 4x, right? 400%. And that's not an accident. So great book on the topic about small iterations. And the book is largely framed around professional work, but I'm sure the author, I don't remember, I'm sure the author mentions this, but even if they don't, it certainly applies to life outside the professional world as well. It's a great book.
Wow, thank you. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Changing subjects. I mean, maybe a little bit, maybe substantially, depending on how we connect the dots. For a lot of your life, you mentioned to me, you were like, you had the idea that, hey, if you can't prove it to me, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you say more about how you developed that attitude, that mindset towards life?
In retrospect, I believe a lot of that philosophy, let's say, that way of thinking, was probably communicated through common culture. I think many of us think that way. And there's a lot of power in thinking that way. Many times when we're looking at organizing an experiment of some kind, whether it's a personal, professional, scientific endeavor, we try to control for variables. And if there are a lot of different variables involved, we try to say, okay, let's get stability, consistency, predictability in all of these variables. And we're going to just change this one and see what impact that one variable has. So I think, again, that's a very powerful way to look at things. That's a very powerful way to learn. I think that's a very common way of thinking. So I suspect I developed that mode of thinking probably just from popular culture, from being in school with friends and having a life involved with, let's say, the regular world.
Wow, wow. What a powerful response. I mean, we are taught a lot in school about the scientific method and about problem solving. In like for your career, these skills are very essential.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's important. It's important to be able to think that way, and it's very powerful. And at the risk of going beyond what you've asked for, I would offer that I think, as useful and powerful that ability is to be able to think that way, that there may also be other ways of looking at things and trying to understand the world around us that also have value and aren't necessarily in conflict either.
Yeah, let's pull on the thread. Please tell me more about what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm. I'll speak for myself. When I was a young man, I decided my family had been involved with the church, and we had gone to church on Sundays very regularly. And when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, something like that, I decided that I didn't believe that stuff and I was just done with it. So I totally walked away.
And your parents gave you the space to do that.
Yeah, that's right. And to add a little context to that point specifically, my parents, I asked my mother one time, I said, what were you thinking? What was it like trying to bring us to church? And what were you thinking around the time that, the my siblings and I, we started going away from the church? What was going on in your mind and all that? And she said that she really respected the fact that we could make our choices for ourselves, and she wasn't going to force us to have to go and do something we didn't want to do. And for us, it was a case where I think I guess I can't speak for my brothers or my sister, but I'll say for me personally, I think going to church was something I never looked forward to. I always was kind of fighting and never was engaged and was always bored. And it didn't, to me, it didn't mean anything. It wasn't important to me. And when I decided that I would turn away from the church, for me, it wasn't like it was a big sort of change. It was like I was finally acting out what was in my heart anyway at that point. And my mother told me that in our church, which is the same one that I go to now, but this church that I grew up in, we baptize people at 8 years old. We understand from well, I guess I would struggle to cite the exact source because I'm still learning here too. But anyway, we believe that the proper interpretation is that children are baptized at 8 years old. So I was baptized at 8 years old, and I have a brother who's about 2 years older than me, and he was getting baptized at the same time. So he was, of course, 10 years old. And I think part of me wanted to get baptized just because my brother was getting baptized. And I thought, like, well, this is cool. I want to be part of this. Right. And I learned years later, after having asked my mother about this, she said, that once the kids were baptized, she wasn't going to force them to continue going to church. And if they didn't want to go, she was just tired of fighting with us every week to get us to go. And so it just, yeah, I can't say I remember a whole lot about the specific details there, but it's not hard for me to imagine, a good mother at her wit's end being like, guys, I actually, I really appreciate the fact that she gave me that choice, and
So your mother gave you the choice to you got baptized, and then your mother gave you the choice not to go to church, and you chose not to go to church.
That's right.
What was it like for you to have that freedom to make that choice?
I would say, from what I remember about it, to me, it felt like it was, I guess, just a relief of burden. Going to church on Sunday wasn't something I was interested in. It wasn't something I wanted to do. We were there for a few hours every week. I didn't want to be there. So to me, I think it just felt like, I don't know, freedom in a way. It felt like I had this burden of a thing I had to do that was lifted off of my shoulders.
So then middle school, high school, college, and then you're starting your career. How how are you feeling about life? I mean, obviously you're making progress, and you're doing all kinds of things, but what's going on inside of you?
Yeah. It was dark and it was challenging, I would say. And to try to summarize a lot of complication in just a couple of words, I don't think I knew why. I don't think I had any good sense why. I guess things just felt empty, felt meaningless. Like there was no direction. Maybe safe to say that it felt like the cards were stacked against me in a lot of ways. And I think I really struggled with like, well, what's the point of any of this? And like, why does suffering have to exist? And it just questions that really I don't think I had sophisticated answers to. And there was a lot of despair, a lot of desperation at that point in my life. I was, yeah, it wasn't until I was probably about 30, I had just turned 30, maybe 31, something like that, right around that age, where I started to recognize that these questions about like what is why are we here? What are we supposed to do? Why do I feel empty all the time? Why do I feel directionless? Why do I just feel like breaking down when things externally seem to be just fine? And I've got a good job, I've got a safe place to live, you know, a lot of things to be grateful for, and yet still I just felt like there was just something missing and I didn't know what it was.
What a question you just said. Why do I feel like breaking down all the time when things on the outside are going well? What is it like to have that contrast? Like you look at your outer world and go, things are good, but then you look at how you feel and then you're like, things ain't going good at all. What is that like?
It's not very nice.
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked that question because I know I've dealt with that before many times in my life, and I imagine a lot of people listening deal with that. I just wanted to highlight that question. I mean, there's a lot of story to cover. We don't need to go into detail, but just for all of us to think about that question and know it's a real thing that's not talked about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. And I've also come to believe that there is an answer. That there is an answer.
Hmm. How did Dr. Jordan B. Peterson help you personally start to discover the answer you were searching for?
For me, I can point to something rather specific. There were a lot of things going on in my life that we just simply won't have time to cover. But one specific thing that I can point to is indeed, as you mentioned, a series of lectures by the Canadian college professor, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. He gave maybe it was a 5-part, maybe it was 10-part, I can't remember, but he gave a series of lectures about the book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Christian Bible and also is the first book of scripture in the Jewish scripture as well. And that book of Genesis, maybe your audience has heard of stories like the story of Adam and Eve, have heard the story of the fall of man, have heard the story of Noah's Ark, and maybe they've even heard of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Those all come from this book of Genesis. And Dr. Jordan B. Peterson offered a lecture in a lecture hall that he posted online for free, that in which he made a case for the wisdom of the Bible from a secular perspective. So he took this, of course, highly spiritual book and made a case for the things that we can learn just based on secular understanding. So if we take all the metaphysics out of it, we take all the spirituality stuff out of it, and we just look at what the book is teaching about lessons and about life, he made a case for the things to be learned by studying that book. And that got me thinking a little bit. That got me thinking, maybe there's some wisdom that I can glean in that dusty old book of fairy tales. Because that's really how I thought of it. That's really like, I figured it was all just made up and it didn't mean anything. And so for me, I said, well, maybe there's something I can learn by studying this ancient book, and who knows, maybe I'll get through it and I'll learn a thing or two that's useful and I can move on with my life. Right. And I look back now at how silly that is and how arrogant it was to look at things like that. But that's how I looked at it. And that's kind of how I got curious enough about the Bible to start reading it.
Fascinating. Briefly, how did this man's lectures come in? How did you know about them?
I think growing up, I spent a lot of time on YouTube. And so I'm sure I was just, fumbling around and looking for something to sort of stave off those, that, like we were talking about, that dark, nasty feeling. One thing I've learned as an adult is I really relied on video games and YouTube and stuff like that to help suppress some of those things and just not think about them, to numb myself from those feelings of pain and discomfort and hurt, right? That dark stuff that we were talking about earlier. That's, I think, what I wanted to get away from. And so your question is, how did I come into these lectures? And so I think I'm guessing YouTube probably just suggested it on my home feed or something, would be my guess, because there was a very, very popular interview years ago now with that same gentleman and an interviewer. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I believe her name was Kathy Newman. I don't remember what network she was representing, but there's maybe like a 10-minute clip of an interview that they did. And of course, I'm sure it had some like sensational headline. I don't remember what it was specifically, but something like, college professor destroys, interviewer, like what, I'm sure it was something like that to like grab attention, right? And I didn't know who these people were or what they were talking about, but it just came up on the suggested YouTube feed, I'm sure. I don't remember specifically, but I remember that being one of the first ones that I saw. And one of the things that I really respected about what was happening in that interview is the way that I could see that there were traps being laid by the interviewer, and that the interviewee, Dr. Peterson, he was being interviewed about he got involved in some political thing. And anyway, he was being interviewed about that, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. And he was calm. He was measured. He didn't get sucked into this game about, finger pointing or like, he didn't fall for the traps. Right. And I thought, wow, okay, he's presenting an idea here, whether you agree or not. It appeared to me like he was at least presenting his point of view in a way that appeared to be rational, that appeared to be measured, or it appeared to be healthy and controlled. So again, independent of whether or not a person agrees with his political position, I think that is an appropriate way for us to conduct ourselves, to be civilized, communicate with one another. And I really appreciated that. And I think from there, it made me go, well, what else has this guy done? And then I think that's I'm sure how I ended up encountering those lectures.
Speaking of really unique things that happen off your radar coming into your life, how did the book Strategic Relocation come into your life?
The book Strategic Relocation came into my life around the time that the coronavirus was going on. That was, 2021, right? And I think, I suppose it was even before that, right? 2020 really is. Anyway, there were a couple years there where I was living in Boston, and I think whether a person agrees with what the state did or disagrees with what the state did, I think it's fair to characterize as what they did as one where they asked people. Well, no, I don't believe it was a request. I think it was executive order, right? So by force of law, people were required to leave their work. They were required to not visit family, friends, neighbors. They were required to adhere to curfews. There were several things that were going on that I really struggled with, because I had grown up with this idea that we live in a nation of law and freedom, and the idea that one person, whether they were in a governor's chair or whether they were in a local, what would the jurisdiction's not the right word, but a local authority, right? That a person could declare, well, suddenly this is how things work now. And, that for me was really challenging. And part of it, I think, was because I'm not married. I don't have any children. I didn't have a roommate, and I was working from home at that time anyway. So I was sort of compelled to spend all of my time in this little apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right outside Boston. And I really struggled with that. And I knew I couldn't stay. I knew I couldn't continue living in a place like that. And a lot of people lost jobs. A lot of businesses went out of business, and follow up to that, I thought, was pretty disappointing as well. And so it was one of those things where I knew I couldn't stay. So then the question was, well, where do I go? And I was at this point beginning to think about where I was hoping my life would take me. And I didn't know exactly, but I was having some ideas that perhaps I'd like to be married someday. Perhaps I'd like to have children. I'd like to own some land, a few things like that. And just trying to, I was thinking about, well, okay, if that's what I'm aiming at, where is a good place to do that? Where is a good place to raise a family? Where is a good place where I can kind of live my life in a way that is fair and respectful, and also not, say, under the thumb of somebody who's being unfair? And so I thought about those things, and after a lot of research, you asked about the book Strategic Location. That book is a
Strategic Relocation, right?
Thank you. Yeah. I'm sure I missaid it there. That book is about being intentional about where a person lives to protect against scenarios that may be unlikely, but at least are things that we might want to pay attention to. So the book describes things like how long is a growing season in a given area. It talks about what sort of laws and regulations are in a particular state. And again, some of those laws we really want, and some of them we don't, right? So trying to pay attention to what are some of the significant laws that impact freedom and security, and trying to figure out how do we balance these things. Also things like looking at, what is the risk of natural disaster? what is the risk of things like warfare between nations? And so it takes all these different factors and tries to put them together in a way that allows a person to make an educated decision about where they choose to relocate. And that, of course, is where the book gets its title, because the relocation is the strategy, right? The strategy is to relocate to somewhere that you can live the kind of life that you want to live. And after doing a lot of research on a lot of different things, I knew that I would either move to New Hampshire or I would move to South Dakota. And that for me was, again, based on a variety of factors. And not only that book, but certainly that played a role in just helping me understand, what do I want to think about? Why do I want to think about those things? And looking at some different factors and trying to decide, well, how much should I weigh this and how much should I measure this, and trying to figure those things out. That book was a big factor in that.
So have you ever physically been to Sioux Falls before you moved here?
No, sir. I think, yeah, the furthest west I had ever been before I moved to Sioux Falls, I think, was Chicago. I think that's true.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you drive out, or how did you get here?
The first time I stepped foot in Sioux Falls, I took a day off of work because, again, I was working remotely. So I took a day off of work. I flew out of the Logan Airport in Boston, which was just down the road from where I lived. I flew out from Logan and ended up in Sioux Falls, rented a car, drove through the city, kind of got a chance to look at a couple things. I basically just drove down the main, here now from the airport, Minnesota Ave, and then I turned down Phillips, right? And I had found this apartment online. It seemed like it was too good to be true. It was right downtown, nice looking apartment, a good secure building. One of the things I was looking for, thanks to that book I had read, was I wanted an apartment with a basement in case there's a tornado, because I didn't know anything about the Midwest. And all I knew was that tornadoes can happen out here. And so I thought, well, let me get an apartment with a basement just in case an emergency comes up, right? So I found this really nice apartment and I said, okay, but the price here is too good to be true. There's no way this is real. And so I thought, well, let me set up an appointment to get a tour. I, again, flew out, rented the car, got a chance to drive around the city, got here, had 2 hours for an appointment that took half an hour, right? So I got a chance to just kind of walk around the downtown a little bit, ask people like, are you from the area? What do you think? How long have you lived here? Anyway, I get to actually go and into the building where I live now, into the apartment, and the woman gave me a tour, and I was like, yeah, this is real. Like, this place really does exist. And so I knew pretty quickly that I was going to move here, and then I drove back to the airport and flew home. It was pretty wild.
And then was the next time driving out here?
The next time I stepped foot in Sioux Falls was when I drove out here. I thank God I have a brother 2 years older than me. His name is Brandon, and he helped me move. So I rented a U-Haul, parked it up outside my apartment. He came over. I think he took a half day at work or something. He came over, and his wife and his kids were there, and we got the truck all loaded up. And then God bless him, he drove the 2 days out with me in that truck. So we drove all the way out here, and he helped me get the thing unloaded. And it's one of those things where, of course, I was grateful for his help in loading and unloading the truck, but perhaps more than anything, I was just grateful to get to spend time with my brother, because growing up, we had a good family, but it wasn't like we spent a whole lot of one-on-one time, that kind of thing. Just, he and I together like that with nothing else to do but drive and talk. We never really created those opportunities for ourselves. So for me to get the chance to actually do that and talk to him and have him there with me, it really meant a lot.
Wow. Yeah. What a great memory and so much help. Then how, I've never asked you this, how did you find Toastmasters? Like, you're totally new in the Sioux Falls. You've been here once for a few hours. then you're just settling into this dream apartment that has a dream win price.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find Toastmasters?
Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, Toastmasters is a public speaking and leadership club. And I first got introduced to Toastmasters before I had ever even knew that the city of Sioux Falls, South Dakota existed.
Mm.
I was working for a company in Manchester, New Hampshire, and my boss, he had talked about this thing called Toastmasters, and he said, "Oh, it's a public speaking club, and you can go and just learn how to improve your public speaking and your professionalism, your presentation skills, your leadership skills, your time management, yada yada yada. All these professional skills that, of course, are useful for a person who works in a professional environment." And honestly, as a quick aside, I think Toastmasters is a great and useful program for anyone because as people, we all communicate. So we all have something to learn about communication. But that's how I got started in Toastmasters. So I was a Toastmaster in Manchester for, I think it was 4 or 5 years, something like that. I stopped going to Toastmasters when I moved. There's a whole story there about I spent a few months living in Spain, and I wanted to learn Spanish, and I was only there for a few months. It actually worked out really well, but I was planning to stay for a year. And so after just a few months, I came back, and that's how I started living in Boston. And that little time away had kind of broken the habit that I had of going to Toastmasters. So I wasn't going anymore. And then when I moved to the new city here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, it only took me like a week to go, yeah, I don't know anyone here. I want to improve my public speaking skills. I remember there was this group called Toastmasters. It's all over the world, so surely there's one here in Sioux Falls. What a great way to work on professional skills, but to meet people and to start to like feel like I was part of this community. And it's been a great blessing. I've been part of Toastmasters for, I mean, at this point, I think it's 4 years. Well, 4 years here in Sioux Falls. So altogether, maybe I'm guessing 8 or 9 years over like a 15-year period, something like that, I think. I mean, the numbers are probably not exactly right, but close.
Then you've risen through the ranks very quickly in Sioux Falls Toastmasters. Can you say a little about that?
Of course. One of the things that I love about Toastmasters is that it really provides the opportunity for people to practice their leadership skills. And so even after a person has spent a year in a club, and sometimes even less, a person has the opportunity to serve as a club officer. I think I served as a club officer maybe it was my second year with the club here in Sioux Falls. I think I served as our vice president of membership, and I had a lot of fun doing that. And then I had the chance to run for president of the club and was elected to do that. And at the same time, I had also been asked if I and another Toastmaster, if the two of us would be willing to serve as area and division directors as well. So really quick, the way the structure works is that you have a club, and then you have about 4 clubs to an area, and then about 4 areas to a division. And then a division, I think, has 6 divisions in a district. And then from district, you go to region, and at that point, they're worldwide. But your question was, how did I get to that spot? So someone had asked me and another Toastmaster if we'd be willing to be, one of us be area director and one of us be division director, because they needed people to fill the roles. And I thought, well, I'm doing president. I've never done president before, but if you need the help, I'm willing to learn. And so I said, sure, I'll do that. And I gave the right of first refusal to the other person, and they chose to be the area director. So then I became the division director. And so here I was, first time ever serving in any Toastmaster office beyond the vice president of membership. And I was both my club president and the division director for Division F in District 78. So that for me was, I learned a lot that year. I had a lot of help. the Toastmasters club, the Toastmasters program offers a lot of material for training. And I tried to follow up with that. I got a lot of help from the other division directors and district leaders. I learned a lot, and I certainly didn't do a perfect job. There were some things where I said, I look, I just can't do this. It's just too much. And so there were some things I had to say, I'm sorry, but I can't fulfill this request or this responsibility. But I did the best I could, and I learned a lot.
And then, I mean, that's a phenomenal story. And then you've come into a professional. I mean, for your day job, you've come into a position you love, and that is deeply meaningful to you. How did that happen? Was that pre-planned?
No. I work for St. Joseph's Indian School, which is a Catholic nonprofit residential school here in South Dakota. The campus is located on the Missouri River in Chamberlain, but we have a business office here in Sioux Falls. My responsibility is to manage their software development team, and we've got a small team of programmers. We've got 3 full-time programmers, and we just hired a 4th, which is really exciting, and we're hoping to hire one more, but it's a small team of programmers. And I got involved with this role in the first place because this is a long story, and I'm aware of the time here, so I don't want to keep you too late. I'll give you the short version, which is I was really struggling in that job that I was working remotely while I was living in the Boston area. I was just really, really, really struggling with that darkness, like I was telling you about earlier, where to the point where like it felt like everything in my life was just sucking energy. It was just draining energy. And it was to the point where like it felt like I had so little energy from things that were going on in my life that I felt like I couldn't even escape, right? I had no energy to even try to break free. But by some miracle, I managed to put in one job application to one place in Sioux Falls that I thought, I was like, well, I'm not so sure I'm actually even really all that serious about this job, but it will give me practice interviewing. So
only one job application. One?
Yeah. Well, the truth is maybe there was a second or third. I don't remember, but literally no more than 3. Like I'm telling you, it took every ounce of my strength to put in one application. It was just brutal. It was really, really brutal. A very dark time. And so I put in that application. Months went by, and then I got a phone call from my now boss, and he says, "Oh, is this Kiley?" "Yes." "And you applied to St. Joseph's Indian School?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot I had applied there." So I thought, okay, well, again, I'm really struggling. I said, I can at least use some practice interviewing. So I went in and interviewed. And when I learned what the school was doing, when I learned who they were serving, when I learned why they needed somebody with like programming expertise, like what in the world is a school hiring a senior programmer for? Like, what is that about? Right. All that combined really had me curious. And when I went to go actually visit the campus as part of my interview, I really felt a strong feeling of peace. And I understood pretty quickly that this job was where I was supposed to be. And I have fallen in love with the place. And at the time when I had first started, I had just started kind of getting into church a little bit. I had mentioned I went till I was 8 years old, and then I quit cold turkey 25 years. And then that thing with Dr. Peterson got me to kind of get curious about the Bible. Again, there's a whole story there we don't have time for, but that got me to like, okay, start coming to church. But I was still really skeptical about it, but I was just like, I'm going to kind of see where this goes and see where it takes me. And so I kept doing that and just just kept going and just kept going and just kept going. And that continued as I moved to Sioux Falls. And so here I continued just kind of going, but not really sure I believed any of that stuff and just kind of going with the motions. And when I started this job at St. Joe's, I still really had no testimony, no faith. And for me, we had a leadership training, a management training that happened my second day at work. And the president of the school started our leadership meeting with a prayer. And I thought that was really cool, because in my whole life, my faith and professionalism didn't mix, right? They were things that were kept very separate. And you don't bring your church stuff to work, and you don't bring your work stuff to church, right? Like, to me, they were very different things. And so even though I really didn't have a strong faith, I didn't have much testimony, the fact that this work was combining these two things, and it was something I was kind of curious about, had me go, wow, yeah, this is different. This is cool. And I'm so grateful for that. And it's something I still love to tell people about it, because it's just it's such it was such an eye-opening experience, and really cool. There's a lot I glossed over there, but that's how I ended up working for St. Joe's, and I love it. It's such a blessing. It's such a blessing.
In the story you told really quickly there, it sounds like it really has changed your feelings towards life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I would say it's not that the events of the story have changed my life. I would say it's the development of my faith that has changed my life. And that has taken roots in so many different areas all over my life. I've still got a lot to learn, that's for sure. And I don't want anybody getting the impression that I've got this all figured out. But I can tell you, Jason, I have more hope, more peace, and more joy. I've got more direction and clarity than I've ever had in my entire life. And I had alluded earlier that there's an answer to darkness and despair. And I tell you, I really do believe I found it. And I think a person who's curious about that, I would invite a person who is curious about that antidote to be willing to give it a shot, because I think it can change your whole life for the better. And it certainly has mine. And all that difficult time that I went through, I actually look back on that now, and I say that I don't ever want to go back to that life.
You're talking very poetically and very powerfully, and I would love to talk with you for another hour or two. There'll definitely be a lot to talk about, but last question. I talk about the power of doing our imperfect best. And what it means to me personally is I envision the best I want for my life, and I want to offer to the world, and I start going for it, and obstacles come up, frustrations, mistakes, what have you. And instead of being stopped by all that, I try to learn from all that and go back forward to the best towards the best I envision. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you, Kiley?
I think doing your imperfect best means to try, right? To earnestly try, because we're never going to have all the answers to all of life's questions and mysteries. We're never going to be perfect in this life. That will never happen. And therefore, everything if not everything, pretty close to it. Virtually everything we do is imperfect by some definition. Therefore, I think to do our imperfect best is to just try, just do the best we can. And I think in some ways, if we try at something and we do the best that we're capable of, in some ways that is perfect. There's sort of a dichotomy here, right? That I like to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And when we have somebody brand new come in and they're learning a technique for the first time, even if they're missing key details, right, we still try to encourage the students by telling them, you did the technique perfectly. Because the important thing is that they are there. It takes a lot of courage to come in and do that. And for somebody to try something totally different in a place that they might feel uncomfortable, they don't know anybody, they're learning a technique for the first time. Yeah, okay, fine. They're missing, let's say, 40% of the details, right? But they've got 60% of it right. And if we focus on that 60% of that technique that they got right and encourage that part, they're going to want to keep coming back. And the more they keep coming back, the more they're going to learn. And the more they learn, the more that's going to help them in their life, both in jiu-jitsu, but then across all areas of life, because I think anything with real depth has something to teach us about life. And so in that sense, I think doing our imperfect best is about just showing up and trying.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kiley. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being on Awkwardly Awesome podcast and sharing a profound stories and so much wisdom and faith and heart from your life with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. It's been my pleasure to be here.
I'm going to wrap up the podcast now, but please stay on the line, Kiley. It takes a minute for everything to upload, okay?
I will. Thank you, Jason.
And thank you all for tuning in and listening and thinking about the Kiley's stories and his perspective and most of all, I hope you think about his kindness, his quiet confidence, and his just. I mean, he's so dignified, isn't he? And so diplomatic and. Yeah, well, yeah, I could go on and on, but you saw the show. And tune in next week for another episode of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. And please comment. We love comments. And most of all, thanks for being you. You are the best. You are the one and only one of you who can do exactly what you can do in the world. So please go do it. Thanks for being you.